The conference room on the 43rd floor of the Donovan and Pierce headquarters gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed Manhattan like a corporate painting. Chelsea Donovan sat at the head of the table, her tailored charcoal suit as sharp as the decisions she'd made that morning. Across from her, 12 executives awaited her final word on the merger, a deal worth $1,200,000 that would reshape the industry. "The numbers are solid," Marcus, her CFO, said, sliding the projection across the glass table. "We close this by Friday, and Q4 becomes our strongest quarter in 5 years." Chelsea's green eyes scanned the documents with practiced efficiency. Every comma, every clause, every contingency had been reviewed 3 times. This was what she did best, transforming chaos into order, uncertainty into profit. But as she reached for her fountain pen, something caught in her chest. A tightness, a hesitation she couldn't name. "Chelsea?" Marcus prompted. She signed. The room exhaled collectively. 2 hours later, Chelsea stood alone in her corner office, watching the December sun sink behind the city's jagged skyline. The merger was done. The board was pleased. Her assistant had already forwarded 17 new emails marked urgent, and yet the tightness remained, spreading from her chest into her throat like cold water rising. Her phone buzzed. Another message from Derek. "We need to talk about the apartment. And the dog. Call me." She deleted it without reading further. Their relationship had ended 6 weeks ago in this very office, during another late night, when he'd finally said what they both knew. "You're married to this company, Chelsea. There's no room for anything else." He wasn't wrong. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window. 34 years old, CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and utterly exhausted in ways that sleep couldn't fix. The woman in the glass looked successful, looked powerful, looked completely hollow. Chelsea's personal phone rang. Her mother. "Sweetheart, are you coming for Christmas? Your father wants to know if you'll make it this year." "Mom, you missed Thanksgiving, and your cousin Sarah's wedding, and your nephew's baptism." Her mother's voice carried that specific combination of love and disappointment that only mothers master. "When was the last time you took a real break?" Chelsea rubbed her temples. "I'm working on something, maybe New Year's." "Maybe isn't a plan, Chelsea. It's an excuse." After the call ended, Chelsea stood motionless for 10 minutes, the city lights blinking on below like a circuit board coming to life. Her mother's words echoed. When was the last time she'd taken a real break? Not a working vacation with her laptop and conference calls. Not a long weekend where she answered emails from a beach resort. A real break. The idea arrived fully formed, as her best ideas always did. She needed to disappear. By 9 o'clock the next morning, Chelsea had made arrangements that would have seemed impossible to anyone who didn't understand how efficiently she operated. Her assistant, Jennifer, had found a remote cabin in upstate New York, 3 hours north near the Adirondacks, available immediately for a 2-week rental. No internet, minimal cell service, complete isolation. "Are you sure about this?" Jennifer asked, concern creasing her usually composed face. "You've never taken more than 4 days off, not in the 7 years I've worked for you." "Which is exactly why I need to do this," Chelsea replied, already mentally packing. "Marcus can handle operations, forward only genuine emergencies to my personal cell. Everything else waits until January." Jennifer nodded slowly. "And if Mr. Pemberton calls about the Singapore expansion?" "It waits." "And if—" "Jennifer," Chelsea's voice softened, "I need this. Trust me." The drive north began under clear skies that Friday afternoon. Chelsea's black Range Rover cut through the city traffic with the same determination she brought to everything. Her playlist, carefully curated, mostly instrumental, filled the silence. Miles accumulated, the landscape transformed. Skyscrapers gave way to suburbs, suburbs to small towns to forests that pressed close to the 2-lane highway like curious spectators. By hour 2, snow began falling, gentle at first, almost decorative. But as Chelsea pushed further north, the flakes multiplied and thickened, transforming the world into something from a snow globe. The GPS on her dashboard showed 12 more miles to the cabin. The road narrowed, the forest deepened, the snow fell harder. Chelsea's hands tightened on the wheel. She'd driven in snow before. Everyone who lived in the northeast had, but this felt different. Heavier, more insistent, the kind of snow that erased roads and landmarks, that made familiar places strange. The wipers worked overtime, barely keeping pace. Visibility dropped to perhaps 50 feet. Chelsea slowed to 30 miles per hour, then 25. The rental cabin's directions mentioned a turnoff marked by a red mailbox. But in this whiteout, everything looked the same. White road, white trees, white sky, all bleeding together into an infinite blank page. Then she saw it, a shape in the road, small, dark against the white, moving. Chelsea's foot slammed the brake. The Range Rover's anti-lock system engaged with a mechanical stutter, and the vehicle slid, smooth and terrifying, before stopping perhaps 10 feet from the shape. Her heart hammered. Her breath came in short gasps. And then the shape moved again, resolving into something that made Chelsea's blood freeze colder than the storm outside. A child, a little girl, no more than 5 years old, stood in the middle of the snowy road. She wore a pink winter coat dusted with snow, small boots, and no hat. Her dark hair was plastered to her face. Her eyes, huge and terrified, locked onto Chelsea's headlights. For one impossible moment, neither moved. Then Chelsea threw the transmission into park and launched herself out of the vehicle, leaving the door hanging open, the engine running, the headlights cutting through the storm. "Hey, hey, sweetie!" Chelsea's voice fought against the wind. She ran toward the child, her designer boots sliding on the accumulated snow. "Are you okay?" The girl didn't answer. She stood frozen, trembling, tears cutting tracks through the snow on her cheeks. Chelsea dropped to her knees in the road, heedless of the cold seeping through her expensive wool pants. She pulled off her own scarf and wrapped it around the child's shoulders. "It's okay. You're okay. I've got you." "My daddy," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I can't find my daddy." Chelsea's CEO instincts, the same ones that processed complex data and made million-dollar decisions, kicked into a different gear. She scanned the immediate area. Nothing but snow and trees and the growing darkness of late afternoon, becoming evening. "What's your name?" Chelsea asked, keeping her voice calm and warm. "Chloe. Chloe. That's a beautiful name. I'm Chelsea. Can you tell me where you last saw your daddy?" The girl pointed vaguely toward the tree line. "He was cutting wood. And then I couldn't see him. And I walked and walked and—" Her voice cracked into sobs. Chelsea made a decision. "Okay, Chloe, we're going to find him. But first, we need to get you warm. Come on." She scooped the child into her arms, so light, so small, so terrifyingly vulnerable, and carried her back to the Range Rover. Inside the vehicle, Chelsea cranked the heat to maximum and grabbed a blanket from the back seat. She wrapped Chloe in layers, then pulled out her phone. On bar of service, flickering, she dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I found a lost child on Route 47 about—" Chelsea checked the GPS. "About 8 miles north of Keene Valley. She says her father was cutting wood nearby. He may be injured or lost in the storm." The dispatcher's voice remained professionally calm. "Stay on the line. I'm dispatching units now. Can you describe your exact location?" Chelsea provided coordinates while keeping one eye on Chloe, who sat shivering despite the heat and blankets. The girl's lips had a bluish tinge. How long had she been out there? "Help is coming," Chelsea said, both to the dispatcher and to Chloe. "Can you show me where you came from?" Chloe nodded and pointed again toward the trees. There, barely visible, was a narrow path, almost completely obscured by snow. Chelsea made another decision. "Dispatch, I'm going to look for the father. The child is safe in my vehicle with heat and blankets. I'll keep my phone on me." "Ma'am, I'd advise you to wait for—" But Chelsea was already moving. She'd spent a decade making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. She could certainly handle a search in the snow. She grabbed a flashlight from the Range Rover's emergency kit, told Chloe to stay put and lock the doors, and plunged into the trees. The path, if it could be called that, wound between towering pines heavy with snow. Chelsea's flashlight beam cut through the growing darkness, illuminating a world that seemed utterly alien to someone who spent her life in glass towers. "Hello," she called out. "Can anyone hear me?" The wind swallowed her voice. She pushed deeper, her boots sinking into snow that reached mid-calf. Her breath came in visible clouds. Her fingers ached despite her gloves. And then, perhaps 50 yards into the trees, her flashlight found something. Red, blood on white snow, and then a body. A man lay partially covered by snow near a fallen tree. An axe rested a few feet away. Chelsea's medical training, limited to a corporate first aid course taken years ago, kicked in. She ran to him, dropped to her knees, checked for a pulse. There, faint but present. "Sir, can you hear me?" She shook his shoulder. No response. She checked for obvious injuries and found a gash on his forehead, still bleeding slowly, and his left arm bent at an unnatural angle. Chelsea pulled out her phone. No signal. She looked back toward the road, then at the unconscious man, then at her phone again. The CEO part of her brain, the part that calculated risk and probability, understood that she couldn't move him alone. Not safely, not in this storm, but she couldn't leave him either. She had to get back to Chloe, had to flag down the emergency responders, Headlights flashed through the trees, red and blue lights followed. "Here!" Chelsea screamed, waving her flashlight. "Over here!" Two figures materialized from the storm, a police officer and a paramedic, both moving with practiced efficiency through the deep snow. "We've got him," the paramedic said, already kneeling beside the man. "You did good finding him." The police officer, a woman perhaps 50 years old with kind eyes, looked at Chelsea. "You're the one who called it in?" "Yes. His daughter, Chloe, she's in my car on the road. She's okay, but she needs to be checked." What happened next unfolded with surreal efficiency. The paramedics stabilized the man, Ethan, according to his wallet, and prepared him for transport. But as they worked, a call came through the officer's radio. "Be advised, Route 47 is now closed due to accumulation and zero visibility. All units return to station except those on active rescue. No transport vehicles moving until further notice." The officer looked at Chelsea, then at Ethan, then back at Chelsea. "Where were you headed?" "A rental cabin. Should be close. Red mailbox marking the turnoff." The officer nodded slowly. "I know the place. The Whitmore cabin. You're about a mile away." She paused, calculating. "Look, we can't get an ambulance through, and the hospital's 40 minutes even in good weather. This man needs shelter, warmth, and monitoring." "Do you have supplies at the cabin?" Chelsea's mouth went dry. I think so. I've never been there." "Here's the situation," the officer continued. "We can try to move him to the station, but that's an hour on foot through this storm in his condition. Or you can take him to the cabin. It's close, it's shelter, and I can check on you both as soon as the road's clear." Chelsea looked at the unconscious man, then thought of little Chloe waiting in her Range Rover. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. "We'll take him to the cabin." 40 minutes later, Chelsea found herself doing something she never imagined, helping 2 police officers carry an unconscious man into a rustic cabin while his 5-year-old daughter clutched her hand. The cabin was small but well-maintained. 1 bedroom, a loft, a kitchen, and a living room with a massive stone fireplace. The officers helped her get Ethan onto the couch, left her with instructions and emergency supplies, and promised to return as soon as possible. Then they were gone. And Chelsea Donovan, CEO, decision-maker, woman who controlled millions of dollars with a signature, stood in a cabin in the middle of a snowstorm with an unconscious man and a frightened child, completely out of her depth. Chloe tugged on her sleeve. "Is my daddy going to be okay?" Chelsea looked down at those huge, trusting eyes and felt something crack inside her chest. Not the tightness she'd carried from the city. Something different. Something that felt like the beginning of breaking open. "Yes," Chelsea heard herself say, "your daddy's going to be okay. I promise." And as she said it, she realized she'd just made the first promise in years that had nothing to do with profit margins or quarterly returns. She'd made a promise to a child, a promise that mattered more than any contract she'd ever signed. The storm howled outside. The cabin settled into its bones, and Chelsea Donovan began the strangest break of her life. The first hour passed in a blur of controlled panic, disguised as competence. Chelsea built a fire in the stone fireplace, thank God for those corporate team-building retreats that included wilderness survival basics, and cranked up the cabin's heating system. She found blankets in a cedar chest and piled them over Ethan, checking his pulse every 10 minutes like the paramedics had instructed. Steady, weak, but steady. Chloe sat in an oversized armchair, wrapped in Chelsea's cashmere coat, watching her father with eyes that seemed far too old for such a small face. She hadn't spoken since the officers left, hadn't cried, hadn't moved, just watched and waited with a patience that broke Chelsea's heart. "Chloe," Chelsea said gently, kneeling beside the chair, "when was the last time you ate something?" The girl's eyes flickered toward her. "Breakfast. Daddy made pancakes. He always makes pancakes on Fridays because Fridays are special." Chelsea glanced at her watch. 7:43 p.m. That meant Chloe hadn't eaten in nearly 12 hours. "How about I make us some dinner? Are you hungry?" A small nod. The cabin's kitchen was surprisingly well stocked. Chelsea found canned soup, crackers, pasta, and, in the small refrigerator, milk, eggs, and cheese. Someone had prepared this place for guests. She heated tomato soup on the gas stove and made grilled cheese sandwiches, moving through the motions with the same focus she brought to budget meetings. Task, solution, execute. But when she placed the plate in front of Chloe, the girl just stared at it. "Is something wrong?" Chelsea asked. "Do you not like grilled cheese?" "I should wait for Daddy," Chloe whispered. "He says we always eat together. Family eats together." Chelsea's throat tightened. She thought of all the meals she'd eaten alone at her desk, all the dinners she'd skipped entirely for conference calls, all the time she'd chosen work over the simple act of sharing food with another human being. "Your daddy would want you to eat," Chelsea said softly. "And when he wakes up, we'll all eat together. I promise. But right now, you need to be strong for him, okay?" Chloe considered this with grave seriousness, then picked up half of the sandwich. She took a small bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. "It's good. You make good grilled cheese." Something warm bloomed in Chelsea's chest. "Thank you. That might be the nicest compliment I've received in years." They ate in companionable silence, punctuated only by the crackling fire and the wind howling against the cabin's walls. Through the window, Chelsea could see nothing but white, snow falling so thick it looked like static on a television screen. The world had contracted to this small space, these four walls, these three people. After dinner, Chelsea cleaned up while Chloe returned to her vigil beside her father. The girl reached out and took Ethan's hand in both of hers, holding it like an anchor. "Does your daddy have a phone?" Chelsea asked. "Is there someone I should call? Your mom, maybe, or—" "Mommy's in heaven," Chloe said matter-of-factly. "She got sick when I was 3. It's just me and Daddy now, but that's okay because Daddy says we're a team, and teams stick together no matter what." Chelsea's hand froze on the dish towel. A widower, raising a daughter alone, working hard enough to injure himself, and still making pancakes every Friday because Fridays are special. "Your daddy sounds like a really good man," Chelsea said quietly. "He's the best daddy in the whole world," Chloe agreed with absolute certainty. "He builds things with wood and reads me stories and teaches me about trees. He knows every tree in the forest. He says trees are like people. They grow strong by weathering storms together." Chelsea moved to the couch and checked Ethan's pulse again. Still steady. The gash on his forehead had stopped bleeding, and the bandage the paramedics applied looked clean. His face, now that she studied it properly, was weathered but kind, laugh lines around his eyes, a strong jaw darkened with stubble, carpenter's hands, scarred and capable. He looked like someone who belonged in this forest, in this snow, in this life that was completely foreign to everything Chelsea knew. "We should get you to bed," Chelsea said, checking her watch. 9:15. "Where do you usually sleep?" Chloe pointed to the loft. "Up there, but I want to stay with Daddy." "I understand, but your daddy needs rest, and so do you. How about this? I'll stay down here and watch him all night. If anything changes, I'll wake you immediately. Deal?" Chloe's lower lip trembled. "You promise?" "I promise." It took 20 minutes to get Chloe settled in the loft. Chelsea found her pajamas in a small backpack near the door. Ethan had clearly been planning to stay at the cabin for the weekend. She helped Chloe change, brushed her teeth, and tucked her into the twin bed under the sloped ceiling. "Chelsea?" Chloe's voice was small in the darkness. "Yes, thank you for finding me. I was really scared." Chelsea sat on the edge of the bed, something she'd never done before, with any child, ever. "You were very brave. Walking through that storm to find help, that took courage. Daddy says courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what you need to do even when you are scared. Your daddy's right. Will you stay until I fall asleep?" So Chelsea stayed, sitting in the dim light cast by a small lamp, watching this child she'd met only hours ago slowly drift into sleep. Chloe's breathing evened out, her small hand relaxing its grip on the blanket. And Chelsea found herself thinking about courage, about doing what you need to do, even when you're scared, about whether she'd been brave or just running away when she fled the city. Downstairs, the fire needed tending. Chelsea added logs, arranged them with the poker, and watched flames consume wood with ancient hunger. She checked on Ethan, pulse steady, breathing regular, no fever. The paramedics had said the head wound looked worse than it was, and the broken arm was clean. Barring complications, he'd wake up sore and confused, but fundamentally okay. Chelsea pulled the armchair close to the couch and settled in with a blanket. Her phone sat on the side table, occasionally flickering with one bar of service before dropping to none. She'd managed to send one text to Jennifer: "Snowed in, safe, don't worry, see you in 2 weeks." Then the signal vanished entirely. No emails, no calls, no urgent matters requiring her immediate attention. Just silence and snow and the sound of another person breathing. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like exhaling after holding her breath for years. Chelsea woke to weak grey light filtering through the windows and a small voice saying her name. "Chelsea, Chelsea, you need to wake up." She jerked upright, momentarily disoriented. The cabin, the storm, Ethan, Chloe, everything came rushing back. Chloe stood beside the chair in her pink pajamas, her dark hair sticking up in every direction. "I'm hungry, and I think Daddy moved." Chelsea was on her feet instantly, moving to the couch. Ethan's eyes were still closed, but his head had turned slightly, and his right hand, the uninjured one, flexed against the blanket. "Ethan," Chelsea said softly, "can you hear me?" A groan. Then his eyes fluttered open. Hazel, confused, focusing slowly on the cabin's ceiling. "What?" His voice came out rough, barely above a whisper. "Where?" "You're safe," Chelsea said quickly. "You had an accident while cutting wood. You hit your head and broke your arm, but you're okay. Chloe's okay. Everyone's okay." At his daughter's name, Ethan's eyes sharpened. He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back. "Chloe! I'm here, Daddy!" Chloe rushed forward and Chelsea helped boost her onto the couch beside her father. "You got hurt and Chelsea found me and brought us here, and she made grilled cheese, and she promised you'd be okay, and you are." Ethan's good arm wrapped around his daughter, pulling her close. He buried his face in her hair, and his shoulders shook slightly. When he looked up at Chelsea, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking on the words. "Thank you for finding her, for everything." Chelsea felt her own throat tighten. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Ethan said firmly. "Not everyone stops. Not everyone helps. You did. You saved us both." The moment stretched between them, heavy with meaning Chelsea couldn't quite process. She cleared her throat. "How do you feel? Can you rate your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Maybe a 7, 8 when I move." Ethan looked down at his splintered arm. "The paramedics got to me?" "Barely. The storm closed the roads before they could transport you to the hospital. A police officer said they'd check on us as soon as conditions allowed." Chelsea moved to the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I can make breakfast. There are eggs, and Chloe mentioned something about pancakes." Chloe bounced slightly on the couch. "Daddy makes the best pancakes, with blueberries. Can you make them with blueberries, Chelsea?" Chelsea opened the small freezer and found, miraculously, frozen blueberries. "I can try. But I should warn you both, I haven't made pancakes since I was in college, and even then they were from a box." "From a box?" Chloe looked scandalized. "Daddy makes them from scratch. He says anything worth doing is worth doing right." "Does he?" Chelsea glanced at Ethan, who had the grace to look embarrassed. I might have said that once or twice, he admitted. About woodworking. Chloe applies it to everything now. It's good advice, Chelsea said, surprising herself. When was the last time she'd done something from scratch, instead of delegating it or finding the most efficient solution? She found a cookbook in one of the kitchen drawers, actual paper, with handwritten notes in the margins, and located a pancake recipe. As she measured flour and cracked eggs, Chloe climbed down from the couch and dragged a kitchen chair to the counter, standing on it to watch. You have to mix it gently, Chloe instructed seriously. Daddy says if you mix too hard, the pancakes get tough. You want them fluffy. Fluffy, got it. Chelsea stirred carefully, feeling absurdly like she was in a cooking exam. How's this? Chloe peered into the bowl. That's good. Now the blueberries. Just a handful in each pancake so they're everywhere. Chelsea heated a griddle, also found in the well-stocked kitchen, and poured her first pancake. It spread into a lopsided oval. The second one was better. The third one actually looked like a circle. You're getting better, Chloe cheered. Practice makes perfect. That's what Daddy says too. Your daddy says a lot of wise things, Chelsea murmured. From the couch, Ethan's voice drifted over, still weak but tinged with amusement. My daughter is an excellent student. She remembers everything I've ever said and will absolutely use it against me later. That's what daughters do, Chelsea said without thinking. Then she paused, spatula in hand, remembering her own father. When was the last time she'd had a real conversation with him? When was the last time they'd just sat and talked about something other than the company? The pancakes piled up, golden, fluffy, studded with blueberries that burst purple against the batter. Chelsea made scrambled eggs too, and found real maple syrup in the pantry. By the time she carried plates to the living room, the cabin smelled like a home instead of a rental property. We can't eat together if Daddy's on the couch, Chloe observed. Family eats at the table. So they maneuvered Ethan carefully to the small dining table near the window, Chelsea supporting his good side while he tried not to jostle his broken arm. He was taller than she'd realized, perhaps 6'2", and solid in the way of men who worked with their hands. He moved slowly, clearly in pain, but with determination. Once seated, they ate while snow continued to fall outside. The world beyond the window was absolutely silent, absolutely white, absolutely separate from everything Chelsea had ever known. These are really good, Ethan said after his third pancake. You said you haven't made them since college? Not from scratch. I usually just grab coffee on my way to work, sometimes a protein bar at my desk. What do you do? Ethan asked. For work, I mean. Chelsea hesitated. In her world, everyone knew who she was. Chelsea Donovan, CEO, decision-maker, woman on every industry's watch list. But here, in this cabin, she was just someone who'd stopped her car in a storm. I work in business, she said carefully. Corporate management, it's demanding. Is that why you came here? To the cabin? To get away from demanding? Something like that. I needed a break. Chelsea pushed blueberries around her plate. I haven't taken a real vacation in 7 years. My mother pointed out that maybe isn't a plan, it's an excuse. Ethan smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, made him look younger despite the lines around his eyes. Mothers have a way of cutting through our excuses. What about you? Chelsea asked. What do you do? I'm a carpenter, custom furniture mostly. I work from a shop near Keene Valley. Been doing it since... He glanced at Chloe, who was busy drowning her pancakes in syrup. Since my wife passed. She was an artist, painted landscapes. We used to come to these woods together, and she'd paint while I'd sketch furniture designs. After she died, I couldn't stay in the city anymore. Too many memories, too much noise. So we moved up here, Chloe and me, and started over. I'm sorry, Chelsea said quietly. About your wife, thank you. It's been 2 years. Some days are harder than others, but Chloe keeps me going. She's my reason for everything. He reached over and ruffled his daughter's hair. Right, Bug. Right, Daddy. Chloe beamed, syrup on her chin. We're a team. After breakfast, they settled into an unexpected routine. Ethan needed rest, so Chelsea helped him back to the couch with a book Chloe fetched from the loft. Chelsea cleaned the dishes while Chloe sat at the table with crayons and paper, drawing pictures of the snow. "This is you," Chloe announced, holding up a drawing of a tall figure with long hair. "And this is me, and this is Daddy, and this is all of us together in the cabin." Chelsea studied the drawing, crude and childish, but capturing something essential. 3 figures inside a small rectangle, snow falling around them, a fire in the fireplace. Safe, together, a unit. "It's beautiful," Chelsea said. "Can I keep it?" Chloe nodded enthusiastically. "You can put it in your office. Then you'll remember us when you go back to being demanding." Chelsea laughed, actually laughed, full and genuine, for the first time in months. "I'll do that. I'll put it right on my desk." The day unfolded slowly. Chelsea checked Ethan's vitals every few hours. She read Chloe's stories from a collection of children's books on the shelf. She made lunch, sandwiches and soup again, nothing fancy, and dinner, pasta with jarred sauce that somehow tasted better than any restaurant meal she'd had in the city. As evening approached, Chloe curled up against her father on the couch, and Ethan read to her from a worn copy of a book about a girl who lived in the woods. His voice was gentle, patient, bringing the characters to life. Chloe's eyes drooped, her breathing slowed, and still Ethan kept reading, even after she'd fallen asleep against his chest. Chelsea watched from the armchair, her own book forgotten in her lap. This scene, this ordinary, domestic, simple scene, felt more real than any boardroom, any negotiation, any triumph she'd achieved in her career. "She falls asleep like this every night," Ethan said softly, noticing Chelsea's gaze. "Usually takes about 3 pages, but I always finish the chapter. Seems wrong to leave a story incomplete. You're a good father." "I try. Some days I feel like I'm failing, like she needs more than one broken-down carpenter can provide. But then she looks at me like I hung the moon, and I think maybe we're doing okay." He paused. "You're good with her. Do you have kids?" "No, no children, no husband, no." Chelsea stopped herself. "I have my career. That's always been enough." "Has it?" The question hung in the warm air between them. Chelsea wanted to say yes, wanted to defend the choices she'd made, the sacrifices that had brought her success, but looking at Ethan and Chloe at this small, perfect moment of completion, she couldn't. "I don't know anymore," she admitted. "This week, I signed a deal worth over $1 million, and afterwards I felt nothing, just empty, like I'd won a game I didn't remember agreeing to play." Ethan nodded slowly. "My wife used to say that success isn't about what you gain. It's about what you'd be willing to lose, what you'd keep if everything else was taken away." "What would you keep?" Chelsea asked. Ethan looked down at his sleeping daughter. "This, every time. Just this." Outside, the snow had stopped. The clouds began to break, revealing patches of deep twilight blue, scattered with early stars. The storm was passing. Soon the roads would clear. The police would check on them. Chelsea would be free to continue to her vacation, and Ethan and Chloe would return to their life. And somehow that thought made Chelsea's chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with stress or pressure or the weight of responsibility. It felt like losing something she'd only just discovered existed. "Chelsea?" Ethan's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Thank you for everything, for stopping when you saw Chloe, for staying, for helping. You could have just called for help and left, but you didn't. That says a lot about who you are." "I'm not sure I know who I am anymore," Chelsea said quietly. "But being here with you both, it feels like maybe I'm starting to figure it out." The fire crackled. The stars emerged one by one beyond the window, and in the warm glow of the cabin, 3 people who'd been strangers 36 hours ago sat together in comfortable silence, bound by circumstance and something deeper that none of them could quite name yet. Tomorrow would bring decisions. Tomorrow would bring the world rushing back in. But tonight, they had this. And for the first time in years, Chelsea Donovan understood what her mother meant when she said maybe isn't a plan. Sometimes the plan finds you. The third day dawned crystalline and sharp. Chelsea woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin windows with an intensity that made her squint. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world transformed. Trees bowed under the weight of pristine snow, icicles hanging like crystal chandeliers from the eaves, and a silence so profound it felt almost sacred. She checked her phone out of habit. 3 bars of service, 17 missed calls, 43 emails marked urgent. Chelsea stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the notifications. Jennifer, Marcus, her father, the board chairman, Derek, inexplicably, 5 times. The entire infrastructure of her life demanding attention, demanding decisions, demanding her return to the world she'd fled. She powered the phone off and set it face down on the nightstand. From downstairs came voices, Chloe's bright chatter and Ethan's deeper responses. The smell of coffee drifted up rich and dark. Chelsea dressed quickly in jeans and a sweater, both borrowed from supplies at the cabin, since her own clothes were impractical for this life. When she descended the stairs, she found Ethan standing at the stove with his good arm, carefully flipping eggs, while Chloe sat at the counter, swinging her legs and narrating a story about a squirrel she'd seen outside. And then the squirrel went like this. Chloe puffed out her cheeks, because his mouth was so full of acorns. "Daddy, tell Chelsea about squirrels storing food for winter." Ethan glanced over his shoulder, and something passed between them when their eyes met. Recognition, maybe, or acknowledgement of the strange intimacy that develops between people who've shared crisis and recovery. "Morning," he said. "I hope you don't mind. I couldn't sleep, and Chloe woke up demanding breakfast, and I figured I owed you about 1,000 meals at this point." "You should be resting," Chelsea said, but without much conviction. Ethan looked better. The color had returned to his face, and though his arm remained in its splint, he moved with more confidence. "I've rested for 2 days. Any more and I'll go crazy." He slid eggs onto plates with practiced efficiency, despite his injury. "Besides, I wanted to make you a proper breakfast. Consider it payment for the life-saving." They ate together at the table, as had become their unspoken ritual. Toast with butter and jam, eggs cooked perfectly, coffee that tasted like comfort. Chloe told more stories, about school, about her best friend Emma who lived down the road from their house, about the treehouse Ethan was building before the accident. "It's going to have windows and a roof and a pulley system for bringing up supplies," Chloe explained with great seriousness. "Daddy says every good treehouse needs a pulley system, and when it's done, Emma can come over and we'll have a club, the super secret tree club. No boys allowed except Daddy because he built it." "Seems fair," Chelsea said, smiling around her coffee cup. "What will you do in your super-secret tree club?" "Important things, like reading and having snacks and watching birds. Daddy says if you sit very still and very quiet, the birds forget you're there and act natural. That's when you see their real personalities." Chelsea thought about that, sitting still and quiet enough that the world forgets you're there. How long had it been since she'd been still, since she'd been quiet, since she'd let anything approach her naturally instead of chasing it with agenda and intention? After breakfast, Ethan insisted on helping with dishes despite Chelsea's protests. They worked side by side at the sink, falling into an easy rhythm, Chelsea washing, Ethan drying with his good hand. Chloe had returned to her crayons, drawing another picture at the table. "The road should be clear by now," Ethan said quietly, not meeting Chelsea's eyes. "The county's good about ploughing the main routes after storms. You could probably make it out today if you wanted to continue your vacation. Get to wherever you were actually planning to go." "Yeah," Chelsea said, scrubbing a plate with more attention than it required. "Probably. Or," Ethan hesitated, then continued, "you could stay. I mean, if you wanted. This is your rental cabin for 2 weeks, right? Chloe and I can head home. We only live about 5 miles from here. I can manage the drive now that I'm up and moving." Chelsea rinsed the plate, watching soap bubbles swirl down the drain. The reasonable thing, the sensible thing, was to let them leave. She'd done her good deed. She'd saved them. The story was complete, tied up neatly, ready to become an anecdote she'd tell at dinner parties. "I once found a lost child in a snowstorm," but the thought of them leaving made something in her chest constrict painfully. "What if you stayed?" The words came out before Chelsea could stop them. "I mean, what if we all stayed? For a few more days at least, just until you're fully recovered. That arm should be checked by a doctor, and driving might be risky and—" She was babbling. Chelsea Donovan, who'd negotiated with Fortune 100 CEOs without breaking a sweat, was babbling. Ethan turned to look at her fully. Chelsea, you came here to get away from people, from stress. You don't need 2 house guests. Maybe I do, Chelsea interrupted. Maybe that's exactly what I need. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Chloe's crayons scratched against paper. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, snow slid from a branch and hit the ground with a soft thump. "Okay," Ethan said finally. "We'll stay, but only if you let me cook and if you promise to actually relax. Deal?" "Deal." The next 3 days unfolded with a dreamlike quality that Chelsea knew couldn't last, but desperately wanted to. They developed routines. Ethan made breakfast. Chelsea cleaned up. They took walks in the snow with Chloe between them, the little girl's mittened hands reaching for both of theirs as she jumped over frozen streams and pointed out animal tracks. Ethan taught Chelsea the difference between deer and rabbit prints, between oak and maple trees, even in winter, between the calls of different birds. "You see the world differently," Chelsea observed on one of these walks. They'd stopped at a clearing where the sun broke through the canopy in golden shafts. Chloe was ahead of them, building what she called a snow palace for woodland creatures. "How do you mean?" Ethan asked. "You notice things, small things. The way that branch is bent, you said that means deer have been feeding here. The pattern of ice on that rock, you explained it shows the water flow underneath. I walk through the world like I'm checking boxes on a list. You walk through it like you're reading a story." Ethan was quiet for a moment, his breath making clouds in the cold air. "My wife taught me that. Sarah. She'd stop in the middle of any hike and just look at something, a leaf, a shadow, the way light hit water, and she'd see art. She'd see meaning. After she died, I had to learn to see that way too, for Chloe. So she'd grow up knowing the world was more than just getting from point A to point B. You must miss her terribly. Every day, but..." He paused, watching Chloe pack snow with fierce concentration. "Grief changes. At first it's this massive thing that fills every space, but gradually it becomes something you carry with you instead of something that carries you. Sarah would want me to keep living, to be happy, to show Chloe that loss doesn't mean the end of joy." Chelsea thought about her own life, the losses she'd sustained, though none as profound as Ethan's. Lost relationships, lost time, lost versions of herself she'd left behind in the climb upward. "I think I've been grieving too," she said slowly, "but I didn't realize it until now. I've been mourning who I thought I'd be, the life I thought I'd have. Somewhere along the way I took a wrong turn and I just kept going, because turning back felt like failure." "It's not too late to find a new path," Ethan said quietly. Before Chelsea could respond, Chloe called out, "Chelsea! Daddy! Come see! The Snow Palace is ready for the Snow Queen." They spent the rest of the afternoon in that clearing, building an elaborate snow structure that grew from palace to castle to entire kingdom. Chelsea found herself laughing, really laughing, as Chloe directed them like a tiny architect with grand visions. When they finally trudged back to the cabin as twilight approached, all three were soaked and freezing and happier than seemed reasonable, given they were just playing in snow. That evening, after Chloe was in bed, Chelsea and Ethan sat by the fire with mugs of tea. The silence between them was comfortable, familiar. Chelsea had never been good with silence. She filled it with work, with noise, with constant motion. But this silence felt different, full instead of empty. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "You said you work in corporate management, but that's not the whole story, is it?" Chelsea smiled wryly. "No, it's not. I'm the CEO of Donovan and Pierce, tech company, 4,700 employees, offices in 12 countries. We just closed a merger worth $1,200,000. Ethan's eyebrows rose. That's impressive. Is it?" Chelsea stared into her tea. "Because right now, sitting here, it feels like I traded everything that matters for a title and a salary and the respect of people I don't actually like very much. What would you do instead, if you could choose anything?" No one had ever asked Chelsea that. Her path had always been assumed, expected, inevitable. High school valedictorian to prestigious university to MBA to executive track to CEO. Each step logical, each decision defensible. "I don't know," she admitted. That's the terrifying part. I've spent 15 years becoming really good at something I'm not sure I actually want. And now I'm 34 and I don't know who I am without it. Ethan set down his mug and turned to face her fully. I think you're someone who stops their car in a blizzard to help a lost child. Someone who stays up all night monitoring a stranger's pulse. Someone who learns to make pancakes from scratch because a 5-year-old asked them to. Someone who builds snow kingdoms and asks about tree names and sits with silence without needing to fill it. That's who you are, Chelsea. The rest is just what you do. The words hit Chelsea like a physical force. She felt tears prick her eyes, the first tears she'd allowed herself in years. I don't know how to be that person in the real world, she whispered. This, she gestured around the cabin, this is a bubble, a moment out of time. When I leave here, I go back to meetings and decisions and expectations, and so don't go back. Chelsea laughed, but it came out choked. I can't just not go back. I have responsibilities. People depend on me. The company will survive without you. Companies always do. But Chloe drew you a picture and asked you to put it in your office. She made you promise. Are you going to go back to a life where you forget to look at it, where you're too busy to remember the girl who drew it? The question cut too close to truth. Chelsea thought about her office, glass and steel and views of Manhattan. Where would Chloe's crayon drawing fit in that space? Would it end up in a drawer, forgotten? Would she become the kind of person who received a child's gift and didn't treasure it? What are you suggesting? Chelsea asked. That I quit my job and move to the woods. I'm suggesting you think about what makes you happy. Really think about it, because from where I'm sitting, you haven't looked happy once when you've talked about your work. But you looked happy today, building snow castles. You looked happy teaching Chloe to identify bird calls. You looked happy this morning, drinking coffee at a table instead of a desk. Chelsea stood abruptly, suddenly needing space. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, stars burned in the clear night sky with an intensity impossible to see in the city. I'm scared, she said finally. I'm scared that if I step away, I'll discover I'm not actually very good at being a person. That work is all I have, that without it I'm just empty. She heard Ethan stand, felt him approach. He stopped a few feet behind her, giving her space but offering presence. You're not empty, Chelsea. You're exhausted. There's a difference. You've been running so hard for so long that you forgot you're allowed to rest. You forgot that rest isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Chelsea turned to face him. He stood in the firelight, this man she'd known for less than a week, and somehow he saw her more clearly than people she'd worked with for years. How do you do it? She asked. How do you make it look so easy? Being a father, running a business, building a life after loss? It's not easy, Ethan said with a soft laugh. I'm terrified most of the time. Terrified I'm failing Chloe. Terrified my business will collapse. Terrified that I'll always be half a person without Sarah. But I wake up every morning and I try. And some days just trying is enough. Just trying, Chelsea repeated. I've spent my whole life exceeding expectations. I'm not sure I know how to just try. Want to learn. The question hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning beyond the words. Chelsea understood what he was really asking. Not just about trying, but about staying. About choosing something different. About taking a risk on a life that didn't come with a strategic plan and quarterly projections. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed on the counter where she'd left it. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The sound was jarring in the cabin's peace, like an alarm breaking a dream. Chelsea walked over and picked it up. 17 new messages, 3 missed calls from Marcus, 2 from Jennifer, 1 from her father with the subject line, "Where are you? Bored is asking questions." Reality reaching through the bubble. Chelsea started, then stopped. Should what? Answer immediately? Drop everything? Explain herself to people who'd never once asked if she was okay? She set the phone down without reading the messages. "Tomorrow," she said. "I'll deal with it tomorrow." Ethan nodded, understanding more than she'd said. Tomorrow's soon enough. But tomorrow came too fast. Chelsea woke to the sound of vehicles outside, the distinctive rumble of trucks and the beeping of machinery backing up. She stumbled downstairs to find Ethan already awake, looking out the front window. "Plows," he said, "and the county maintenance crew. They're clearing the private roads now. We're officially reconnected to civilization." Chelsea joined him at the window. Sure enough, a plough was working its way up the lane, pushing snow aside with mechanical efficiency. Behind it, a utility truck, probably checking power lines. The outside world, arriving with purpose and schedule. "I should call my office," Chelsea said, but didn't move. "Probably," Ethan agreed, also not moving. They stood there together, watching the ploughs work, both understanding that this was ending. Whatever this had been, sanctuary, discovery, unexpected grace, it had an expiration date, and that date had arrived. Chloe appeared on the stairs, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are there big trucks?" "They're clearing the roads, Bug," Ethan said gently, "which means we can go home, get back to our regular life." "But what about Chelsea?" Chloe asked, suddenly wide awake. "Is she coming with us?" Two pairs of eyes turned to Chelsea, one hazel and adult, one dark and childlike, both asking the same essential question. What now? Chelsea's phone buzzed again, and again and again, Marcus calling. She could picture him in the office, 93 floors above Manhattan, frantically trying to manage situations that seemed critically important from that altitude, but impossibly distant from where she stood. She had to make a choice. Go back to the city, resume her life, pretend this week had been a vacation, an anomaly, a brief detour from the path she'd always walked. Or, "Chelsea?" Chloe's voice was small, uncertain. "You're coming back, right? You promised to put my picture in your office. You promised." Chelsea knelt down to Chloe's level. She took the little girl's hands in hers. "I did promise that, and I keep my promises. So you'll come back." Chelsea faltered. She looked up at Ethan, searching his face for an answer he couldn't give. This choice was hers alone. Her phone rang again, this time her father. Chelsea stood, walked to the counter, and picked it up. She could answer. She could explain. She could slip back into being CEO Chelsea Donovan, the woman who always had the right answer, the right plan, the right move. Instead, she powered the phone off entirely. "I need to go to the city," she said slowly, working through it as she spoke. "I have to handle some things in person. Conversations I can't have over the phone." But she looked at Ethan and Chloe, at this makeshift family she'd stumbled into during a snowstorm. "But I'm coming back. I don't know when. I don't know for how long. I don't know what it means. But I'm coming back." Chloe launched herself at Chelsea, wrapping small arms around her waist. "Promise, promise," Chelsea said, and meant it more than any contract she'd ever signed. Ethan said nothing, but his expressions spoke volumes, relief, hope, and something else Chelsea was afraid to name. But 2 hours later, Chelsea's Range Rover was packed. Ethan and Chloe stood in the cabin's doorway, waving as she prepared to drive away. The roads were clear, the sun was bright, and nothing stood between Chelsea and the city except 3 hours of highway and every choice she'd ever made. She started the engine, put it in drive, her foot hovered over the gas pedal, and then she thought about her office, about the view from the 43rd floor, about the leather chair and the glass desk, and the meetings that would fill her calendar the moment she returned. About being CEO Chelsea Donovan again, the woman who didn't have time for snow castles or pancakes, or little girls who drew pictures. She thought about Chloe's drawing, currently tucked into her bag. Where would it go in her office? Would she really look at it? Or would it become invisible, like everything else that didn't serve the business? She thought about Ethan's words. "The rest is just what you do." Chelsea's foot lifted off the gas pedal. She put the car back in park, and then she turned it off entirely. Ethan and Chloe were already back inside when Chelsea climbed out of the Range Rover. She stood in the cleared driveway, her breath making clouds in the cold air, and understood something fundamental. She could go to the city. She could handle everything that needed handling. She could be CEO Chelsea Donovan for a few more months or years or decades, or she could walk back into that cabin and choose something different. The responsible choice was obvious. The smart choice was clear. But standing there in the snow, Chelsea realized that she'd spent her entire life making responsible, smart choices. And those choices had led her to a place where she signed million-dollar deals and felt nothing. Maybe it was time for a different kind of choice. The kind that didn't make sense on a spreadsheet, the kind that couldn't be defended in a board meeting, the kind that was simply, entirely, unreasonably right. Chelsea grabbed her bag from the passenger seat and walked back toward the cabin. She had phone calls to make, conversations to have, a life to unravel and rebuild, but not today. Today, she was going to stay right here, in this bubble outside of time, and figure out who Chelsea Donovan was when she wasn't being a CEO. Tomorrow, she'd start making changes. But today, she was going to help Chloe build a better snow palace. Today was for trying. And for the first time in years, that felt like exactly enough. Chelsea stood at the cabin door, her hand raised to knock when it swung open. Ethan stood there, surprise and something deeper, relief maybe, or recognition, crossing his face. "Forget something?" he asked, though his tone suggested he knew she hadn't. "Yeah," Chelsea said quietly. "Everything." Chloe appeared behind her father, squealing with delight. "You came back! You came back! Daddy, Chelsea came back!" "I see that, Bug." Ethan stepped aside, letting Chelsea enter. Their eyes met as she passed, and in that brief moment, an entire conversation happened without words. Chelsea set her bag down and pulled out her phone. 3 bars of service, strong enough to make the calls she needed to make. "I need a few hours," she said, "to handle some things, and then I need to talk to you both about something important." "We'll be here," Ethan said simply. Chelsea took her phone and laptop to the small bedroom, closing the door behind her. She sat on the bed, staring at the devices that connected her to her entire world, and took a deep breath. Then she powered on the phone. It immediately exploded with notifications. 73 emails, 12 voicemails, text messages from Jennifer, Marcus, her father, board members, even Derek asking if she was okay, in a tone that suggested he thought she'd had some kind of breakdown. Maybe she had. Or maybe she was finally breaking through. She started with Jennifer. "Chelsea, oh my God, where have you been? Are you okay? Marcus has been losing his mind. Your father called 3 times. The board." "Jennifer, I'm fine. I need you to listen carefully." Chelsea's voice was calm, decided. "Clear my calendar for the next week. Everything. Push the Singapore meeting. Postpone the quarterly review. Tell Marcus he's in charge of day-to-day operations. But Chelsea, the Singapore expansion, that's millions of dollars. Marcus can handle it. He's been ready for years. I've just been too controlling to let him." Chelsea paused. "And Jennifer? Start drafting my resignation letter." Silence. Then carefully, "Resignation. I need to do this right. Professional. Clean. But yes, I'm stepping down. Give me 1 week to figure out the transition plan, and then we'll make it official." "Chelsea, are you sure? This is your company. You built this." "No," Chelsea said softly. "I helped build it, but it doesn't need me anymore, and I need to figure out what I need." After Jennifer, who agreed to handle everything despite her obvious shock, Chelsea called Marcus. That conversation was harder. Marcus had been with her since the beginning, had worked late nights and early mornings, had believed in her vision. Telling him she was leaving felt like betrayal. "But why?" Marcus asked, genuinely confused. "We're at the top, Chelsea. We've achieved everything we set out to do, the merger, the expansion, the stock price. And I'm empty, Marcus, completely empty. I close million-dollar deals and feel nothing. I stand in my office looking at the city, and all I see is a prison I built for myself." Chelsea walked to the bedroom window, looking out at the snow-covered trees. "You love this. The strategy, the competition, the wins. You should be CEO. You should have been CEO years ago." This is about that guy, isn't it?" Marcus said. "Derek said you were unstable after the breakup, that you might do something. This has nothing to do with Derek. This is about me finally being honest about what I want, or what I don't want. The company will be fine, better than fine with you running it." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Then are you happy? Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, are you happy?" Chelsea thought about pancakes and snow castles, and a little girl who drew pictures, and a man who saw the world like a story. "I'm starting to remember what happy feels like." "Then I'm glad," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. Truly, you gave everything to this company, Chelsea. You deserve to give something to yourself. The call with her father was predictably difficult. Richard Donovan had founded Donovan and Pierce 40 years ago, had built it from nothing, and had groomed Chelsea to be his successor since she was old enough to sit in board meetings. You're throwing away everything we built, he said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Everything I taught you, everything you worked for. For what? Some cabin in the woods? Some fantasy about simplicity? For myself, Dad. For a chance to figure out who I am when I'm not being your successor, or the company's CEO, or the woman everyone expects me to be. This is foolish, Chelsea. Emotional. You're making a decision based on burnout, and you'll regret it. Maybe, Chelsea admitted, but I'll regret staying more. I've spent my entire life meeting your expectations, Dad, your dreams. I need to find my own. And if you fail, if you discover that you're not happy playing house in the mountains, what then? Chelsea closed her eyes. Then I'll have learned something important. But I can't keep living a life I don't want, just because I'm afraid of the alternative. Her father was silent for several beats. Then, his voice softer. Your mother would have understood this better than I do. She always said you had too much of her in you, too much heart for the business world. She was right. Call me when you're ready to talk about the transition. Officially, we'll do this properly at least. After her father hung up, Chelsea sat with her phone in her lap, emotionally exhausted but strangely light. She'd made the calls, said the words, set something irreversible into motion. In 1 week, she would officially step down as CEO. In 2 weeks, she would be free. Free. The word felt foreign and terrifying and absolutely right. Urdu. When Chelsea emerged from the bedroom 3 hours later, she found Ethan in the kitchen preparing lunch, while Chloe sat at the table working on a new drawing. The domestic scene, so ordinary, so simple, made Chelsea's throat tight. How'd it go? Ethan asked, not turning from the stove, where he was grilling sandwiches one-handed with impressive skill. I quit my job, Chelsea said, or I will officially in a week. I'm stepping down as CEO. Ethan turned then, spatula in hand, his expression unreadable. That's a big decision. It's the right decision. Chelsea moved to the table, sitting across from Chloe. I've been trying to figure out how to explain it to you both. What I want, what this means. Chloe looked up from her drawing. Another picture of the three of them, this time building a snowman. Are you going to stay with us? Chelsea faltered. It's complicated, sweetie. I have some things to figure out first. Where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do, how to be a different person than I've been. But you'll come back, Chloe said with absolute certainty. You promised. I did promise. And I will. But Chloe, Chelsea chose her words carefully. Your dad and I barely know each other. We met less than a week ago. People don't just change their entire lives for people they barely know. Why not? Chloe asked, with the devastating logic of children. If you like someone and they like you and being together makes everyone happy, why wouldn't you be together? Ethan brought plates to the table, setting them down with careful precision. He sat, finally meeting Chelsea's eyes. She makes a good point. Ethan, I know. This is crazy. We've known each other for 6 days. You're a CEO from Manhattan, and I'm a small-town carpenter with a kid. We have nothing in common. This makes no logical sense. He paused, reaching for his sandwich, then setting it down without taking a bite. But I haven't felt this comfortable with another person since Sarah died, and Chloe hasn't drawn a picture that included anyone outside our family since her mom passed. So maybe logic isn't what matters here. Chelsea's hands trembled slightly as she picked up her own sandwich. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared that I'm romanticizing this because it's different from my life, that I'll get bored, that I'll miss the work and the challenges and the million-dollar deals? Ethan asked gently. Yes, the million-dollar deals, the power, the sense of accomplishment. What if I give all that up and discover that this, she gestured around the cabin, this isn't enough? Then you'll know, Ethan said simply, and you'll make different choices. But Chelsea, staying in a life that makes you miserable because you're afraid of the alternative isn't brave. It's just sad. Chloe reached across the table and put her small hand on Chelsea's. You can try. That's what Daddy always says. Just try. And if it doesn't work, you try something else. But you have to try first. Chelsea looked at this 5-year-old child who somehow understood life better than most adults she knew. When did you get so wise? I have a really good teacher, Chloe said, grinning at her father. They ate lunch together, the conversation shifting to lighter topics. What kind of wood Ethan used for his furniture, how Chloe learned to identify different trees, what Chelsea's apartment in Manhattan looked like. But underneath it all hummed a question that needed answering. After lunch, while Chloe was occupied with her crayons, Ethan asked Chelsea to take a walk with him. They bundled up and headed into the woods, following a trail Ethan knew well. The snow crunched under their boots. Their breath formed clouds that mingled in the cold air. "I need to be honest with you," Ethan said after they'd walked in silence for several minutes. "I like you, Chelsea, more than I should after 6 days. And Chloe is already attached. But I can't. I can't be someone's experiment, someone's escape fantasy from a life they're not sure they want to change. I've got a daughter to think about. I can't let her get hurt because you're trying to figure yourself out." "That's fair," Chelsea said quietly. "So I need to know, are you serious about this? About potentially building a life here? Or are you just running away?" Chelsea stopped walking. They'd reached a clearing where a frozen stream cut through the landscape, ice catching the afternoon light like diamonds. She thought about the question, really thought about it. "I don't know," she said finally. "I don't know if I'm running away or running towards something. Maybe both. But Ethan, I've spent 15 years being absolutely certain. Certain about my career path, certain about my decisions, certain about what success looked like. And that certainty led me to a place where I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing I actually needed." She turned to face him. "So maybe not knowing is actually progress. Maybe admitting I don't have all the answers is the first honest thing I've done in years. I can't promise I won't mess this up. I can't promise I'll adapt perfectly to a life that's completely foreign to everything I know. But I can promise to try, really try. Not just go through the motions, but actually invest in figuring out if this life could be real." Ethan studied her face for a long moment. "That's enough," he said finally. "Trying is enough." They stood in the clearing, the silence broken only by the occasional crack of ice settling and the distant call of a bird. Then Ethan reached out with his good hand and took Chelsea's gloved hand in his. The gesture was simple, almost innocent, but it felt monumental. "I'm terrified too," he admitted. "Sarah and I had 13 years together, 13 years of learning each other, building a life, becoming a team. The thought of starting over with someone new, it feels impossible and disloyal and absolutely terrifying." "But," Chelsea prompted, "but she would want me to be happy, and you make me happy. Watching you discover small things, the way snow falls through trees, how to flip a pancake, what Chloe looks like when she's completely content. It's like seeing the world new again. You remind me there's more to life than just surviving. That joy is possible. That maybe, just maybe, we get second chances." Chelsea squeezed his hand. "What if I'm terrible at this? At the small town life? At domesticity? At being part of a family? Then we'll figure it out together." "That's what families do," Ethan smiled. "Besides, you built a Fortune 500 company. I think you can probably learn to live in a small town." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand, and something had shifted between them. Not solved. Nothing was solved yet, but acknowledged, given permission to become real. And that evening, after Chloe was asleep in the loft, Chelsea and Ethan sat by the fire with mugs of tea. Chelsea had her laptop open, showing Ethan the transition plan she'd drafted for the company. Marcus would become CEO. Jennifer would stay as his assistant. The board would receive a detailed explanation. Everything professional, clean, proper. "When does it become official?" Ethan asked. "Next Friday. I need to go to the city on Thursday for final meetings. Sign the papers, address the board, clear out my office." Chelsea closed the laptop. "And then I'll be free. No job, no obligations, no idea what comes next." Sounds terrifying. It is. Sounds exciting. It's that too. Chelsea set down her tea. "Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." "Okay." What if this doesn't work? What if I try living here and I hate it? What if I'm not good with Chloe? What if we discover we have nothing in common when the novelty wears off? Ethan was quiet for a moment, considering. Then we'll have tried, and we'll both know something important about ourselves. But Chelsea, you're asking me to predict the future, and I can't. All I know is that right now, in this moment, having you here feels right. Everything else is just possibility. We can either be paralyzed by all the ways it could go wrong, or we can take a chance on the ways it could go right. When did you become so wise? I learned from my daughter. She's an excellent teacher. Chelsea laughed, then sobered. I want to meet them. Your friends, your community, the people who know you and Chloe. I want to see your workshop, your house, your real life, not just this vacation bubble we've been living in. Are you sure? Small towns talk. The moment I introduce you to anyone, it'll be all over Keene Valley that Ethan Reeves has a woman friend. They'll have us married by the end of the week. Let them talk, Chelsea said with more confidence than she felt. I'm done living my life worried about what other people think. I've spent years managing my image, my reputation, my brand. Maybe it's time to just be, and let people think whatever they think. Okay then. Ethan set down his own mug and stood, offering his hand. Tomorrow we'll drive into town. I'll show you the workshop, introduce you to my neighbor Ellen who watches Chloe sometimes. Maybe grab lunch at the diner where everyone will absolutely stare at us and speculate wildly. Chelsea took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. They stood close, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls, and for a moment Chelsea thought he might kiss her. Instead, he just looked at her, really looked. The way he looked at trees and snow and all the small, beautiful things in the world. You're brave, he said quietly, walking away from everything you built to find something you need. That takes real courage. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being afraid. That's the same thing. He was right, Chelsea realized. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting despite it, choosing possibility over safety, trading certainty for hope. They stood there for another moment, hands clasped, and Chelsea felt something settle in her chest. Not the tightness that had driven her from the city, not the emptiness that had followed her for years. Something new, something that felt suspiciously like peace. So the next morning, they piled into Ethan's truck, an old Ford that smelled like sawdust and coffee. Chloe sat between them, bouncing with excitement about showing Chelsea everything. The drive into Keene Valley took 20 minutes through winding mountain roads, and Chelsea found herself noticing things she would have missed a week ago. The way morning light turned the snow golden, the patterns of animal tracks crossing the road, the distant peaks of the Adirondacks rising like sentinels. The town itself was small, one main street lined with local businesses, a church, a school, a diner and a general store that looked like it had existed since the 1900s. Ethan's workshop was on the edge of town, a converted barn with Reeves custom woodworking painted on a weathered sign. Inside, the space smelled of wood and varnish. Partially completed furniture pieces occupied every surface, a dining table with intricate inlay work, a rocking chair with curved arms, a bookshelf with hand-carved details. Each piece was clearly made with painstaking care and remarkable skill. This is beautiful, Chelsea breathed, running her hand over the smooth surface of the dining table. Ethan, this is art. It's carpentry, he said, but she could hear the pleasure in his voice. It's both. Chelsea moved from piece to piece, examining the craftsmanship. Each item was unique, personal, imbued with character, nothing mass-produced or generic. Everything made to last, made to matter. This is what you gave up? Ethan asked, watching her examine his work. $1 million deals for this? This is real, Chelsea said simply. What I did, it was moving numbers on screens, shuffling resources, making rich people richer. This, she touched the rocking chair, setting it in gentle motion. This will be in someone's home. Someone will sit here and read to their children, or rock a baby to sleep, or just sit and think and be. You're not making products, Ethan. You're making pieces of people's lives. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then, Sarah used to say the same thing, that my work mattered because it was human-scaled, made for people, by a person, with care. She was right. They spent an hour in the workshop, Ethan showing Chelsea his current projects and explaining his process. He had commissions lined up for months, people willing to wait because they wanted something made by hand, made with intention, made to last. His business wasn't making him rich, but it sustained him and Chloe comfortably, and more importantly, it made him happy. From the workshop, they walked to the diner. True to Ethan's prediction, heads turned when they entered. An older woman behind the counter, Ellen, Ethan introduced her, raised her eyebrows significantly. A group of men at a corner table stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Two women by the window leaned together, whispering. "Told you," Ethan murmured. "I can handle it," Chelsea murmured back, though her heart raced. They slid into a booth, Chloe scrambling in beside her father. Ellen approached with menus and barely concealed curiosity. "Well, well," Ellen said, her voice warm but probing. "Ethan Reeves with a pretty woman who isn't his sister. This is news." "Ellen, this is Chelsea. She's—" Ethan paused, clearly uncertain how to categorize their relationship. "A friend," Chelsea supplied smoothly. "I was renting the Whitmore cabin when Ethan had his accident. I helped out, and we've been getting to know each other." Ellen's eyes were sharp, assessing but not unkind. "And how long are you planning to stay, Chelsea?" "I'm not sure yet. I'm figuring that out." "She's going to stay forever," Chloe announced, with the confidence of children who don't understand complexity. "She's going to live with us and be part of our family and everything." Ethan's face flushed. "Chloe, we talked about this." "But it's true. Isn't it true, Chelsea?" Every eye in the diner was on Chelsea now. She could feel the weight of their attention, their speculation, their judgment. A week ago, this would have terrified her. She'd spent years managing her public image with precision, never saying anything that could be misinterpreted or weaponized. But sitting in this small-town diner with Ethan's embarrassed face and Chloe's hopeful eyes, Chelsea found she didn't care what these strangers thought. "I hope so," she said clearly, loud enough that anyone listening would hear. "I hope it's true." Ellen's face broke into a genuine smile. "Well then, welcome to Keene Valley, Chelsea. I hope you like pancakes, because Ethan's going to have to make them for you every Friday. That's his thing with Chloe. Pancakes on Fridays." "I know," Chelsea said, smiling at Chloe. "I've had them. They're excellent. Over lunch. Burgers and fries and milkshakes thick enough to require serious effort. People stopped by their table. Ethan's friends, his neighbors, people who'd known him and Sarah, who'd watched him rebuild his life after loss, who'd seen Chloe grow from a grieving toddler to a bright, confident 5-year-old. They were curious about Chelsea, naturally, but more than curious, they were kind, welcoming, ready to accept her if she proved herself worth accepting. It wasn't the cold, professional courtesy of Manhattan networking events. It was something warmer, more genuine, community. "You did good," Ethan said as they walked back to the truck after lunch. Chloe had run ahead to look in the general store window. "With Ellen and everyone, they can be protective of me and Chloe." "They love you," Chelsea observed. "That's nice, to be loved by a community like that. Do you have that in the city?" Chelsea thought about her colleagues, her professional contacts, the people who'd filled her calendar, and her contacts list. "No," she admitted. "I had connections, professional relationships, people who valued what I could do for them, but not this, not people who care whether I'm happy." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then, "You could have this, if you want it. Community, I mean. It takes time. You have to show up, invest, be part of the fabric of things, but it's possible." "I want to try," Chelsea said, and meant it. That night, back at the cabin, Chelsea sat at the small desk with her laptop open. She was drafting her official resignation letter, the one that would go to the board, be filed with the SEC, be reported in the business press. The end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She typed, "After 15 years of service to Donovan and Pierce, I am stepping down as CEO. Effective immediately following a 1-week transition period. This decision comes after careful consideration and reflection on my personal and professional goals. Professional, diplomatic, revealing nothing." Chelsea deleted it and started again. I am resigning as CEO because I have spent 15 years building something impressive and 0 years building something meaningful. I want to try something different, something smaller, something real. I want to remember what it feels like to be happy. Too honest, too raw. The board would think she'd had a breakdown. She tried a third time, finding middle ground between corporate speak and confession. As she typed, Ethan appeared with 2 mugs of tea, setting one beside her laptop. "How's it going?" he asked. "It's hard to find words for I'm leaving everything I've ever worked for to maybe, possibly, hopefully build a life with a man I've known for a week and his amazing daughter." Ethan laughed softly. "Yeah, I can see how that's challenging." Chelsea saved the draft and closed the laptop. "Tell me about Sarah. Really tell me. I need to know. I need to understand who she was, what you had, what I'm potentially stepping into the shadow of." Ethan sat in the other chair, cradling his tea. She was light. That's the best way to describe her. She found joy in everything. We met in college. She was an art major. I was studying engineering before I switched to carpentry. She'd set up her easel in random places and paint whatever caught her eye. I walked past her 17 times before I finally got the courage to talk to her. He smiled at the memory. She painted me once, said I had interesting shadows. I didn't understand what that meant, but she explained that everyone has light and dark, and the interesting people are the ones who don't hide either, who let themselves be complex. "She sounds wonderful," Chelsea said quietly. She was. And when she got sick, leukemia, aggressive, caught too late, she stayed light even then. She made me promise not to let it destroy me, not to let Chloe grow up sad. She said, Ethan's voice caught, she said life was too precious to waste on grief, that loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even after you're gone. Chelsea felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not trying to replace her. I know, and she wouldn't want to be replaced. She'd want..." Ethan looked at Chelsea directly. "She'd want me to find joy again. To show Chloe that love doesn't end, it transforms, that we can honor the past while still building a future." "Do you think she'd approve of me?" Ethan considered this seriously. "She'd ask if you make me laugh, if you're kind to Chloe, if you see the world as more than just transactions and outcomes. And the answer to all those questions is yes. So yes, I think she'd approve." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping tea, while snow began to fall again outside, gentle this time, soft like a benediction. Tomorrow, Chelsea would drive to the city, would sign papers and have difficult conversations, and officially end one chapter of her life. But tonight, she was here, and here felt like exactly where she was supposed to be. "Chelsea," Ethan said softly, "whatever happens, whether you stay or go, whether this works or doesn't, thank you for stopping your car that day, for helping us, for reminding me that there's more to life than just surviving. Thank you for teaching me that there's more to life than just succeeding," Chelsea replied. Chloe's voice drifted down from the loft. "Are you two done being mushy? Because I can't sleep if you're talking." They both laughed. Ethan called up, "Sorry, Bug, we're done." "Good, because tomorrow Chelsea's going to teach me about the city and I need to be rested." Chelsea and Ethan exchanged glances. "I am?" Chelsea asked. "You are," Chloe confirmed. "You know about tall buildings and lots of people and busy streets. I want to know everything." "Then you'll have to come visit me," Chelsea said, the words feeling like a promise. "When I go to the city on Thursday, maybe you both could come with me. See where I lived, help me pack up my old life." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "Are you sure?" "Yes," Chelsea said firmly. "I want you to see all of me, not just the version that exists in this cabin. I want you to know the full picture before we decide what this is." "Okay then," Ethan agreed. "We'll come with you. Face the city together. Face the city together." It sounded like the beginning of something. Not the end of Chelsea's old life or the start of her new one, but the uncertain, thrilling space in between. The place where anything was possible if you were brave enough to try. And for the first time in years, Chelsea Donovan felt brave enough to try. And brave. 6 months later, the workshop smelled of fresh pine and coffee as Chelsea ran her hand over the smooth surface of the bookshelf she'd just finished sanding. Outside, late spring sunshine turned the mountains emerald and gold. Through the open door, she could hear Chloe's laughter as she played in the yard with Emma, their voices high and bright and perfectly happy. Chelsea's phone, her new phone with a new number that only important people had, buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Q2 numbers are strong. Company's thriving. Hope you are too." She typed back, "Thriving. Thanks for asking." It was true. The first month after leaving Donovan and Pierce had been hard, mourning the loss of identity, struggling with purposelessness, wondering if she'd made a catastrophic mistake. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something had shifted. She'd started helping Ethan in the workshop, learning the craft of woodworking. She'd discovered she had a talent for the design side, sketching pieces, solving spatial problems, understanding what customers wanted before they could articulate it. 3 months ago, they'd officially become partners, Reeves and Donovan Custom Woodworking. The name made Chelsea smile every time she saw it on their business cards. She'd sold her Manhattan apartment and bought a house in Keene Valley, a small craftsman-style place with a yard and a porch and enough room for an office where she worked on designs and managed the business side of the workshop. Some nights she stayed there alone. Some nights she stayed at Ethan's house with him and Chloe. They were taking it slow, building something real, letting it grow naturally instead of forcing it into a shape that made sense on paper. Chloe had started calling her Chelsea Mom last month, which made Chelsea cry the first time and smile every time since. They had their routine: pancakes on Fridays, hikes on Saturdays, Sunday dinners with neighbors and friends. Simple rhythms that marked time by moments instead of deadlines. "Hey!" Ethan appeared in the workshop doorway, his hair dusty with sawdust. "Ellen called. She wants to know if we're coming to the town picnic on Saturday, and if you're entering your blueberry pie in the competition." Chelsea laughed. 6 months ago, she'd burned water. Now she made pies good enough to compete. "Tell her yes, but only if you enter your rocking chair in the craft show." "Deal." He crossed to where she stood and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. They stood like that, looking out at the mountains and the yard where Chloe played, and the life they were building together, piece by careful piece. "Any regrets?" Ethan asked quietly. Chelsea thought about her old office on the 43rd floor, about the $1 million merger and the quarterly reports, and the woman she'd been when she'd signed those contracts. That woman felt like someone she'd known once but no longer recognized. "Not one," she said honestly. "You?" "Not one," he echoed. Chloe's voice rang out, "Chelsea, Daddy, come see the fort we built." They walked out together into the sunshine, hand in hand, to admire a structure made of sticks and stones and pure imagination. And Chelsea realized that this exact moment, this simple joy, this quiet contentment, was worth more than any deal she'd ever closed. She'd traded $1,200,000 and the corner office and the title for pancakes and sawdust and a 5-year-old's laughter. For a man who saw the world as a story worth reading slowly, for a community that knew her name, for work that made things instead of just moving money around, for a life measured in moments instead of meetings. Some people would call it a step down, a waste of her education and talent and years of work. Chelsea called it coming home, because in the end, the choice hadn't been between success and simplicity, between ambition and contentment, between the city and the mountains. The choice had been between existing and living, and finally, Chelsea Donovan had chosen to live.